Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, the 23rd of January. Lots of news to cover today on what's happening with the mortgage market, and housing policy took center stage this week in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, it wasn't in Washington, D.C. It was in Davos, Switzerland. So President Trump has had a lot to say over the last few weeks about housing. He solidified some of it, but there's a lot of things that he's been discussing. And the truth is, some of those ideas are going to help and some of them are not. And so I'm going to go through why. I'm going to talk about how that impacts the housing market, how that's going to impact interest rates, how that's impacting the economy, why he's doing it. And so let's start with what housing policies are being discussed. The answer is a lot of them. First and foremost, why? Because and again, I am very apolitical. I'm speaking factually. I don't agree or disagree publicly to anything that's happening out of Washington, D.C. But what I'm telling you is the president is very clear. He wants to win the midterm elections. He wants the Republicans to be in a good position to win the midterm elections come this November. And so he's pushing policies right now that are going to make people happy, because that is how the current administration stays in power, is to make sure that as people are voting, they feel good about the things that are happening in their life, because if they do, they'll continue to keep things status quo. If they're not happy with if the voting population is not happy with their lives, not happy with the economy, then they are going to say, hey, maybe we should change who we have running things. So that's really what's coming out of Washington, D.C. right now, is they're trying to throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. So you're hearing things about, last year we heard about 50-year mortgages. We heard about portable mortgages. We're not hearing about those things anymore out of Washington, D.C. We're also now hearing about things like using your 401k to purchase a home as a down payment and be able to do that. We're hearing a lot of things that may or may not be actual reality. The few things that we have heard that are actual reality right now are that Trump is doing something about institutional investors purchasing homes. I'm going to go into detail on what that really means and is that going to make a difference. Trump is using some of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's money to buy mortgage bonds, which is supposed to drive down interest rates. So I'm going to talk about that. And then Trump is talking about and pushing Congress to put a 10% cap on interest rates for credit cards. And he's saying that is to help people be able to save money for a down payment to buy a home. So his laser focus right now is on home ownership. How do we make it less expensive to buy homes? But how do we also not tank the value of homes for people who currently own homes? And that's a very fine line to walk, because if he institutes policy that drives housing prices down, then he's going to upset the 65% of the American population that is currently a homeowner, that sees their home ownership and their value in their home, their equity, as the biggest asset they have in their lives. And if he causes housing prices to drop, they're going to revolt. But he also wants to appeal to first-time home buyers, renters, and say, how can I help you become a homeowner? And how can I put policies in place? Because the number one problem with homeownership right now is affordability. And affordability has to do with, what are your wages? How much money are you making? What does it cost you to pay for everything else? Inflation. What's the price of a home? And what are interest rates for buying that home? That's it. That's kind of how the whole affordability thing comes together. Now, affordability is going to get solved through your income going higher, while house interest rates, the cost of owning a home, doesn't go up. We've seen the cost of owning a home go up significantly over the last few years. And that's because housing prices have gone up, interest rates have gone up. Obviously, inflation's created a bigger pinch on your budget. But specifically about housing, we don't want to lower, I'm saying globally, Trump does not want to lower the prices of homes, because that hurts all the people who have equity in their homes. He does want to drive down interest rates. The problem is, driving down interest rates is going to cause more people to want to buy. And if there's not enough homes for sale, supply and demand. The demand goes up because more people want to buy when interest rates are lower, and there's no extra supply. So that causes prices to go up. Great for the current homeowner, not great for the renter. And the idea is, well, how do we thread that needle? How do we find the happy medium here? And so he's trying to figure out, what are the ways in which we can make this work? So let's dive in. The first big policy, he actually signed an executive order on Tuesday that will limit institutional investors, but not the way he said it. So what he's been talking about is, hey, I am going to limit institutional investors' ability to buy homes, okay? But it's not a full ban. He's not banning. So the problem is, what is the definition of an institutional investor? So we don't know, because he's given the Scott Bessent, his Treasury Secretary, he's given him a month to figure out what is the definition, like who fits into that category. That's a really big deal. It's a really big deal. Some people say if you own more than 1,000 single-family homes, you're considered an institutional investor. Well, that's typically where I think they draw the line. But there's some other people arguing, no. We need to get to that middle group, because really the only group we're trying to protect is the mom and pop investors. And mom and pop is generally defined as someone owning less than 10 investment properties. Well, I know a lot of people who are just mom and pop investors, but they've got 15 or 20 investment properties. They're building a decent portfolio, but it's just them. They're not a large company. Okay. So if they draw this rule down to 10, and say if you own more than 10, you can't buy any more investment properties, that could be a major challenge for a lot of landlords who are acquiring a real estate portfolio. Okay. So what does it mean? It means that Trump is limiting access of federally backed money to help people buy. If you are considered an institutional investor, his executive order says we are limiting the federal government's help in getting you that home. Now, what does that ultimately mean? Well, the problem is the big companies go after private money. They don't use the federal government's help to get homes. So it's not going to change very, very much. The second thing is the small investors often go through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That's where it's going to hurt. So if you are a landlord, you are looking at buying and acquiring properties, we probably have to look at private money. We have to look at non-qualified mortgages. There's lots of programs out there, but I think Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac with this executive order are going to be tightening even more how much they are offering for helping people buy investment properties. And that is going to play itself out here in the coming months. But definitely, I think it's not going to impact only the big companies. It's not going to impact them at all, because they can actually use private money to buy these homes. So I don't think we're going to see very much of a difference. Who benefits if institutional investors are limited? Well, if it really does slow down the buying of individual single-family homes, it's mostly going to be felt in the Sun Belt, in the middle of the United States, where it's kind of a market where a lot of new construction is happening, and a lot of those new homes are getting sold to investors, and now they have to be sold to first-time home buyers. So that's an area where we may see a shift. But on the coastal states, there aren't that many homes going to investors, to institutional investors. I don't see it making that big of a difference. Here's the other side of it, though. Let's pretend it works. Let's pretend that this ban on institutional investors works and we have fewer homes going into being bought as rental properties. Well, then that also creates a problem for renters, because it means there's fewer homes to rent, which means that you now have rent prices potentially going up. And so there's unintended consequences here. We're going to see how this plays out. This has been signed as an executive order, but it is not a ban. It is only the federal government saying we're not going to provide any federal incentives, subsidies, etc. And so that's really where this ban on institutional investors is the most that Trump really can implement. He's touting it as more than what it really is. So be careful about the headlines that you read. All right, quickly, the second thing that's happening, it started happening about 3 weeks ago, is that he ordered Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to start spending $200 billion to buy mortgage bonds. It's worked, but the impact wasn't significant. We went from around 6.25% average interest rate for best qualifying buyers to maybe 5.99, 5.8 average interest rate for the best qualifying buyers. I say best qualifying because there's a lot of factors that can make that rate different, but that's basically what it's done. So it is helping, but it's helping just at the margins. It's helping just a little bit in driving down rates some. What we need is the rest of the market to kind of loosen up a little bit, and hopefully this is the grease that will get the market going a little bit lower. The problem is that it's not going to fix affordability by itself. Let's pretend rates drop immediately down to 5%. We're going to have house prices going up. And so affordability is the equation between what the price of the home is, your down payment amount, in other words, how much then you're borrowing, and then the interest rates. That's it. That's affordability. And then the final piece of that is income, because affordability has to do not with what the payment is, but can you afford to make the payment? And as incomes continue to rise, while mortgage payments continue to be stable, the affordability issue becomes less and less of a problem. All right, here's the other thing that Trump is talking about. Now, this is something he cannot implement himself. He's got to get Congress to do it, but he's talking about capping credit card interest rates at 10%. Now, that sounds very, very helpful. If you could get your credit card interest rate down from 25 to 30% down to 10, you can likely pay it off faster to get yourself out of debt sooner. But first of all, Trump can't make that declaration. He can't force that. Congress has to enact it. So he's got to convince Congress to do it. Secondly, they're only talking about doing it for 1 year. Third, Trump is touting this as a housing policy. And he says, well, if you can get your interest rate down on your credit cards, because credit card debt is at an all-time high, it is. If you can get your interest rate down on your credit cards, you have a lower monthly payment. If you have a lower monthly payment, you can afford to put more money aside to save for your down payment on your home. All true. But the truth is, the smarter thing to do if you have a lower interest rate is pile more money against it and pay down the debt, because that interest rate is going to shoot back up in a year. So don't just, I'm going to set this money aside and hope I can use it to buy a home later. That's great. I sell home loans. Like, I want you to buy a home. That's how I get paid. But I want you to think about this logically, and logically taking that little bit of money and saving it is nowhere near as helpful as pushing it back against the principal and paying down your credit cards faster. Okay, but here's the risk. The risk of credit card interest rates being capped at 10% is that a lot of credit card companies are going to close credit lines, or they're going to drop your credit line. They can't charge you higher in interest, but they're saying, look, you're a high risk buyer. Your credit score, your credit card company does check your credit score periodically. They do what's called a soft check, and they kind of just take a sneak peek in there. And they say, what's your credit look like right now? They can do that as often as they want. It's in the fine print of the agreement. And if your credit isn't great, they're going to say, I'm worried about this person. Now, I'm worried about them, but I'm making 25% interest on them, so I'm not that worried. But if I'm only making 10% interest on them, then the risk is not worth the benefit. They're going to close your line of credit, or they're going to shrink your line of credit. Now, that's a really big deal on your credit score. For people who owe $5,000 on a $10,000 credit limit, you owe 50% of your balance. That means you're utilizing 50% of your available credit. Availability or utilization is critical because it shows your ability to have some self-control when it comes to using your credit cards. And so some people worry the wrong way and say, John, that means I have $5,000 available that I could go out and spend. And so it's better if I lower my credit limit to $5,000, because now it doesn't look like I can get myself in trouble. It's the opposite. It looks like you can't control your spending. So if your card balance is very close to your credit limit, it looks like you can't control your spending. That utilization drops your credit score significantly. This becomes a domino effect. So one credit card company drops your credit limit down to matching what you owe. In other words, look, I can only charge 10% interest to this guy. I certainly don't want him charging up more debt on me, so I'm going to drop his limit. Great. That's going to drop your credit score, which is going to cause another credit card company to say, well, wait a second, his credit score is falling. I don't want to be in a bad position with him, so I'm going to lower his credit limit or close his line of credit, which will cause your credit score to fall further, and it'll be a domino effect down the road. So for the best credit buyers, this is no big deal. But really what Trump is trying to do here is to target the people that aren't the best credit buyers, that haven't had a good job or good opportunity to save money. And now he's saying this is going to solve your problems. It's not going to solve your problems. It's going to create another set of problems, including those people who have bad debt, bad credit, or no credit, and they want to open up credit cards to build a credit history, which is critical if you want to buy a home, that you have established credit history. And sometimes we have to start over with new credit cards. And the new credit cards are often secured credit cards or high interest credit cards because the bank doesn't know if they can trust you. But if the bank can only charge 10%, they're not going to give you that option. They're not going to let you get that credit card because sure, they can risk that, hey, if you don't pay, I'm losing money, but I'm making 25% on everybody, so I can afford to lose that money. So there's unintended consequences. And so utilization very much matters when you're qualifying for a mortgage. And so as much as this is designed to be a fix for housing, it can actually be a bigger problem for people qualifying if this 10% cap in interest rates comes into play. But if it does, then you for sure need to focus on paying down your credit cards as quickly as you can. For most people, that's going to be your best bet. Take that lower monthly payment, that lower interest charge, keep paying what you're paying right now, pay down the principal as fast as you can. Use the Snowball method. The Snowball method says you pay the credit card with the smallest balance, you pay extra on that. So if that small balance credit card, you owe $1,000 and your minimum payment is $20 a month, and you raise that to $200 a month because you can afford to add an extra $180. Let's just assume that. Then you add that $200 a month, and in 5 months, it's paid in full. Well, now you no longer have that $200 you're paying there. You go to the next bigger credit card, which has a $50 minimum payment. Now you were paying last month, you paid $200 towards the small card and $50 towards this one. So between those two, you were paying $250. So pay the $250 to the second smallest credit card. And then when that one gets paid off, take whatever you were paying on the next smaller credit card and add it to the $250. You're just picking a number and continuing to throw that number at your credit cards. The Snowball method is the best way to get yourself out of debt. The unknown is whether you should focus on getting out of debt or focus on becoming a homeowner first. Don't make that mistake of assuming you know the right answer. If you're thinking of becoming a homeowner, don't spend all of your money paying down your debt. Talk to me. Get advice on what specifically is the right approach for you. So where are mortgage rates actually right now? I mentioned it earlier. We're somewhere in the high 5s to low 6s. I think we're going to stay in this channel right now. Trump is trying to push interest rates down. Powell is fighting to keep interest rates up and is worried about inflation. And we've got a big battle coming up with the Fed and the new Fed chairperson. And so it's going to be very much a wild ride. Speaking of wild rides, this week was another wild ride. The markets came in after the Monday holiday, and on Tuesday, we're freaking out. Like, wait a second, Trump's taken over Greenland, and the markets don't know how to react to that. Interest rates shot up, stock market fell. Then Trump says, no, I'm not going to do that. The markets react more favorably. This is the volatility I've been talking about. This is what we're going to see over the coming months, is a huge amount of volatility up and down when it comes to interest rates, because we've got a president who likes making headlines, and headlines drive interest rates. So the challenge is a lot of people assume, and hold on one second here. There you go, right here. So a lot of people assume that interest rates react to the market. They do, but the market reacts to headlines. And so really, is the interest rate only reacting to the markets? No, the interest rates are reacting to the headlines because the markets are trying to get ahead of the curve. They're trying to look ahead and say, where are things going? And the headlines is part of what they're reading to read the tea leaves and figure out where things are going. And so mortgage rates do not only respond to markets, but they also respond to headlines. And we saw it this week with Trump's huge reversal on Greenland that drove the market one direction and then turned around and drove the market the other direction. And we're going to continue to see all of this. What does this mean if you're looking to buy a home? First and foremost, I think homeownership is great as long as you can afford the monthly payment. Now, I didn't say as long as you're comfortable with the monthly payment. Nobody is comfortable with their monthly payment compared to renting. It's going to be a long time before we ever get back to the point that owning a home, and I don't know if we're ever going to get back to the point where owning a home is as cheap as renting. Renting does not come with financial benefits, and therefore it's less expensive. Homeownership comes with a lot of long-term financial benefits, but you have to pay more in order to get those benefits. So if you can afford the monthly payment over time, rent keeps going up, mortgage payments stay the same or go down. And so over time, your income is going to rise while your mortgage payment stays the same or goes down. You end up in a position where it's actually more affordable being a homeowner than being a renter. But it never starts that way ever. Never, ever, ever. It's been a long time since it started out like that. And so if you're in a position where, hey, I can afford that step up, I don't love it, I don't want to do it, but I can, then it's a great time to buy a home because you have a lot less competition. You get to pick the home that you want. So that's something critical. What does this mean if you already own a home? Well, I'll tell you what, credit card debt, we just were talking about, it's at all-time highs. It is a good time to look at consolidation, paying off that credit card debt. I've got a lot of buyers who are homeowners already that are saying, hey, I want to buy an investment property or two. So that's a big thing that I'm hearing about right now. Rates are lower than they have been. They're just not super, super low. A lot of people are talking about refinancing, and I'm happy to help guide you through those options as well. Okay, so really right now, the moral of the story is housing is going to really be about supply. How many homes are available for sale and how many homes are available in general to live in? And the supply issue is not going to get fixed overnight. And that's really the thing that we're dealing with. And so right now, preparation is what I want you to focus on, like being prepared. And that means setting up a consultation with me. Scan this QR code up above, click on the link, click on the description, links in the description down below, get set up with a conversation with me so I can help you determine what is your right next step, because really this is a very difficult market to navigate. But Warren Buffett said, when other people are scared, I am excited. When other people are excited, I am scared. I butchered the version of it, but that's kind of the idea. Right now, everybody's scared. They don't know what to do. That's a time to take action. That's a time to be courageous and make a decision that you know in the long term is going to be a great decision. And I'd love to help guide you through that. So if you have any questions about anything, please reach out at any point in time. If you are in California and you're a first-time home buyer, remember Dream for All is coming out February 24th through March 16th. I'm doing a lot of videos on my Dream for All channel about that. Stay tuned on there. If you have any questions about anything at any point in time, reach out, comment on the app, comment in the whatever platform that you're watching on, and please share this information. Subscribe to my channel, share the information with everybody you know, and don't forget to reach out to me and schedule a time so we can talk about your options. Thanks everybody for listening. Have an absolutely wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.